How's it going, everybody? Today we're going to talk about what you should set your rent prices at for your storage units. We're going to talk about before you own the facility, when you first buy it, and how to do rent increases along the way. Before you get into the video, please press that like button. That would help me out a lot, so that way we can share this video with more people. And please subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks so much and enjoy the video. One thing that you're going to look at when you're buying a storage facility is if you can increase the revenue by raising the rent at all, whether that's increasing the storage rent prices that you're renting out the units at, or increasing the rent on the current tenants there already. Something that you can look at to see if the rents on the storage facility are good, if they're too high, or if they're too low, is by looking at the surrounding storage facilities in your competitive market. When you're in a real small place, then your competition is gonna be anywhere from about 3 to 5 miles. When you're in a little bit larger but still rural, you're probably gonna be looking at about a 3-mile radius. And when you're in a real urban or suburban place, you're gonna probably be looking at about a 1-mile radius. Now, when I say the 1 mile, 3 mile, and 5-mile radius, that means all the competitors or all the other self-storage facilities within a 5-mile, 3-mile, or 1-mile radius of your storage facility. To help illustrate this point, we're gonna show it on a whiteboard. Let's say we got competitor A, we've got U, which is the star, competitor B, and competitor C. Let's take one unit size, for example. Let's take a 10 by 20 size for our example unit. You're gonna do this with every single unit, but we're gonna use a 10 by 20 for the example. Let's say unit A is renting out their storage units at $185. Let's say your facility is renting out 10 by 20s at $155. And let's say unit B is renting out theirs at $125. And unit C is renting out theirs at $195. So once you get the prices down for every single unit size for every storage facility, and you want to put them in a comparison, what I like to do is put them in an Excel sheet. I write down my subject property, star, and then I write down subject property A, B, C facility next to it, and I line up their prices. My 5 by 10s here, 10 by 10s here, 10 by 20s here, and I line them across and I see what the prices are that this facility, the one I'm looking at, is charging, and then the other facility is right next to it. So I can see them all in a line. So once I have everything out, all the units, all the prices out on my Excel sheet, then I'm going to call them, or I'm gonna go in person and do market research. You call up facility A, for example, and say, "Hi, how's it going? My name is Fraser, and I'm looking to rent a 10 by 20. Do you have any available?" And then let's say they say yes. You'll say, "Great, how many do you have available?" And they'll tell you the number, 1, 2, 5, whatever it may be. Then you can kind of get an idea on how many they have available in their area. And then you'll do the same thing at facility B and facility C. Now, something that I like to do is I like to go in person and try to get as much information about all the unit sizes and what they have available as much as possible. Something you can ask is, okay, if I was not to get a unit for about a month, do you think you'll have any units available? What I've noticed and what I've found out is by talking to managers in that way, asking as many questions as possible, is that they're really wanting to rent you a storage unit. And so they tend to be pretty open with the information about their units, about the prices and everything that they have. Something if you want to get an idea on everything they have, one other thing you could say is call them up to try to figure out all the prices and units that they have available at the same time, is just say, "Hi, how's it going? My name is Fraser. I'm not sure what size of storage unit I would need. What sizes of units do you have available and what's their prices?" And then hopefully they will go through every single unit size and go through all the prices. "Oh yeah, we have 5 by 10s available for $72 a month. And we have 10 by 10s available for da-da-da-da-da." And they'll go through and you can get an idea from there. Something great to do is if you can go and visit in person is even better than just calling on the phone. And the reason for this is that hopefully you can be on the property. Something that I like to do more than calling, if I can, is go and visit in person and get an idea of how many units they have available, be able to see the facility with my eyes, and so I can figure out how many units they actually have at the facility. If you're able to get on the property and have them show you a unit, you can kind of drive around and walk around the facility and either count the number of units or figure out how to get them to tell you how many units they have total. I've had it before when I've gone to a facility and I've said, "Wow, you have a lot of units that you're managing here. That's awesome." And they're like, "Yeah, I manage 673 units. And I don't remember the exact number, but she gave me the exact number of units, and that was really helpful. The other thing that you can do is when you're driving around the facility, if you're able to do that, is being able to look at all the units and seeing if they have locks on there, If they don't have a lock on the unit, you'll count all the ones that are vacant. This will give you an idea on how full they are at the facility as well. Once you've done all these things with every single storage facility, it'll give you a pretty good idea on the supply and demand in the area. You can't know everything and it won't be perfect, but it will give you a good place to start from. After you get an idea for the supply and demand for each storage facility, all your competitors in the area, you can go back to your Excel sheet and start comparing prices. The facility you're looking at, for example, $155 for a 10 by 20. The facility is pretty much always 100% full. It fluctuates between 98 and 100% full. Facility B, they're $125 for their 10 by 20, and they are 100% full all the time. If anyone ever moves out, they have a wait list and they fill it up right away because their prices are so low, which that's what happens when your prices are so low. You tend to rent out really fast and you have high physical occupancy. And we'll tell you why that may be a bad thing later on in this video. Facility A, you know that their 10 by 20 is $185. And you found out by doing market research that the facility, it has vacancies, but it stays fairly full, but they still have vacancies. And then facility C is $195, and it's pretty comparable to facility A in having some vacancies and having some units available, but they have a higher price at $195 for 10 by 20. When I'm looking at this, I'm gonna be looking at the supply and demand, how full these facilities are, and looking at the price here. I obviously know $155 I can rent out 10 by 20s at. Easy, they stay full. I can go as high as $185 and $195. I know that these facilities are renting out their 10 by 20s at these prices, and people are moving in at these prices. You might want to have two prices in mind, so that way you can conservatively run your numbers. If I know that units rent out at $185, a little bit more than $195, I'm gonna run my numbers off of $185, that I can do a $30 increase on my 10 by 20s in this facility. That'll give me my conservative number. And then I'll have a higher number that hopefully I can rent out all my 10 by 20s at $195 at some point as well. What my secondary gross potential revenue is and my first potential revenue here is. Let's go on to when you buy the facility. Say after you run all your numbers, you feel like it's a good deal, you know that there's room to increase rents. We've seen that already. So we're gonna go ahead and buy that facility. The first question you wanna look at when you buy the new facility is when do you raise rents and how much do you raise and buy at first? We know, we'll go back to our example of our 10 by 20 is $155. And what we're trying to raise it up to is $185. Let's say you have 20 10 by 20s and every single 10 by 20 is rented out. You know that you're charging too little of money if every single one of your units of that size are rented out. You can definitely do rent increases right away without having to really do much because you know that the demand for this 10 by 20s are high in that area. So there's a couple different approaches. You can do the rent increase right away. Let's say you do it right away and you raise it from $155 and let's do a $15 increase. So now you're at $170. Most people probably won't move out at that price. Some people will, but most people won't. $15 isn't a very high increase. You can decide to raise the rent all the way from $155 to $185 right away. Every single dollar that you decide to raise the rent higher is just more risk and higher and closer risk to people moving out. You kind of have to decide how aggressive you want to be. If people decide to move out, can you afford that? You have to take those things into consideration. Something that's good to do when you're analyzing a facility is what improvements that you can make. Say you don't have an electronic gate at the facility. That's something that you could install and get that going first before you raise the rents to tenants. And then you could send out a rent increase letter and say, hi, these are the new features that we've done so far, and here's the new features that we're gonna be adding. Here's the rent increase for it. And so you can kind of just show doing improvements on the facility. We're gonna have more to come. And so we're gonna also be charging more for this, but it's gonna be a lot better of a facility for you. Without saying it, you're showing that you're giving them more value for more money. And that's a really good trade-off and a great way to do rent increases. Moving on, now that you've had the facility for a few months and you've done your first round of rent increases, now you can kind of see how many people moved out because of that and if everyone stayed. Let's say you only had 2 people move out, but you're normally renting and you're renting them back up again and you're renting them at a higher price, at that $185. Something that you're gonna wanna do at the same time of sending out rent increases to your current tenants is you're also gonna wanna raise your street prices. So maybe you're only doing a rent increase out to your current tenants at $170, but if there becomes a vacant unit, you're gonna rent it out to that new person at $185. Now let's say you've owned the facility for a few months. You've done your initial rent increases, you've raised all your street rate prices, and now you can see if you're renting out at this new price and how many people moved out at raising their rents. Let's say nobody really moved out from raising the rents, but a few people moved out as normal. And then you were able to rent out those units at $185 from new tenants. Well, now you can see and show data that you have been able to rent out units at $185. As a few more months go by, or even maybe a year, it depends on how often you want to do rent increases, and that's going to be up to you on the demand for your unit sizes. And you also want to be careful not to raise rents too much, too fast, all the time, so that way tenants aren't getting annoyed and moving out, because that may eventually happen if you constantly are doing rent increases. I think once you're established, a good thing to do is probably yearly rent increases. It can be something as small as $1, $5, $10, or it can be bigger. It really just depends on your gaps, the supply and demand in the area. When you're thinking about buying and owning your own storage facility, you want to kind of think long into the future. A $30 increase may not be ridiculous right at bat, but if this number was all of a sudden $225 is the market rent for the area and not $185 anymore, that's now a $70 increase. And if you do a $70 increase right away to your current tenants, chances are you're probably gonna have a lot more move out. I've done really aggressive things with my first facility before, and I had a lot of people moved out. I toned it down and I learned things along the way. So that's how I know if you're really, really aggressive, you will probably have a lot of move out. The goal may be to get to $225, but realize that you may not get there right away all at once. Maybe your first rent increase is a $30 increase, and that'll bring you up to $185. Well, you're still gonna be $40 short of this. And so you're gonna take another year, 2 years, 3 years maybe, to actually get up to this rent price for the current tenants. All the while, when you have vacant units, as long as the supply and demand is there, then you can rent out new tenants at $225, and slowly over the next couple of years, get things up from $155 to $225 in a reasonable manner. A good thing to keep in mind is a long-term mindset when you're taking over storage facilities, when you're buying them, getting rent prices up to where you want them to be and up to the market rents as well. It doesn't just happen overnight. Let's say you've got a few different unit sizes, 10 by 10s and 10 by 20s, and they rent out really, really well. Well, when I'm looking at setting new street rates to my units that are in high demand, I'm now competing against myself. I'm not necessarily going out and looking at my competitors anymore. I'm gonna compete with myself and what I think I can rent it out for. If you remember in the first example, the highest one was $195. That's great. You kind of have that in your back of your mind. You know that that price is out there and that that facility is renting out that price. But you may be able to get $210 for a 10 by 20 because you've seen the demand in that area. So I may change my $185 price now to $210 and be renting out new vacant units at $210 and testing that out. And if they are moving at this price, then I'm gonna stay there. And if they don't move at that price, then I'm gonna bring it back down, maybe to 200. And if they're moving fast at that price, then maybe I bring them up to 205. And I just kind of test it there. And so you play with those numbers back and forth a little bit, but you wanna focus on competing against yourself, especially once you're established and you know the supply and demand for your units. And you're gonna do that in the opposite direction as well. You may see other facilities and they're renting out their 10 by 20s at $195, $185, but maybe you're struggling at that, and the price that you see that's working really well for your facility and that you're gonna be able to rent out at is $175. And so that's what you probably should stay at. As you own a storage facility, there's gonna be two main things that you're gonna be paying attention to. One is gross revenue, and two is physical occupancy. Gross revenue trumps and always trumps physical occupancy. It is more important to be a higher revenue and not 100% full physically than it is to be 100% full with less revenue. That seems like a, well, duh. And I've come into this with a lot of people, is that they will be concerned about it not being 100% full. I don't care if my storage facilities are 100% full, and here's why. We'll do this example and we'll make this really simple. Let's say we have 100 units, and we are also 100% occupied on these 100 units, and each unit is renting out for $50 per month. That is going to give us $5,000 of revenue. Now, let's say there's another facility, and it's also got 100 units, but it is only 75% full, and it's got 75 units. But each of those units are being rented out at $100 a piece. The math on that is $7,500. Which facility would you rather have? This should be a no-brainer. The one that has 100% physical occupancy or the one that has 75% physical occupancy? The one that I would choose is obviously this one. There's a couple reasons for that. One is obviously I'm bringing in more revenue. That is more important than having 100% units filled up. The second part of it is that it's only 75% full, but I also have 25 more units that I can fill up at, let's say, $100 per unit. That's gonna give me another $2,500 in potential revenue. So now my gross potential here is $10,000, and this gross potential is only $5,000. This is not counting any rent increases. This is why gross revenue will always trump physical occupancy. It does not matter that your physical occupancy is 100%. You wanna focus on getting as much revenue as you can. If the facility that you have is 100% full, then you can tell already that you aren't charging high enough. If you are at 95% full and you've got one of each unit size vacant, chances are you're renting out at a pretty good price then. And that's probably good and where you should stay. But if you're constantly full on one unit size, then you aren't charging a high enough price. Now, I think there's a point to where you can be charging way too much and also being way too greedy. You don't wanna do that either. For example, if a 10 by 20 in that area is $200 and you've decided that you have really high demand for your 10 by 20s and you've decided you're gonna rent them out for $220. I think that's pretty reasonable. But what I think would be crazy is if you were trying to charge $300 or even maybe $275. I think you get to the point to where you're charging way too high. Even maybe $250 is too high for the area. You will know, you'll have to be the judge of it yourself. I can't speak for you. Something that I think is really important to do in business is to remember that the tenants that are renting out your units are the lifeblood of your business. That's what I consider them. Without tenants, you don't have any revenue coming into the facility and you essentially don't have a business. You're not profitable, you're not making money, and so how can you survive and run the business? Keep in mind that the tenants are important and that you don't wanna be way charging too much money because it's just not fair. I think there's a moral and ethical part to running a business as well that you need to keep in mind that these are real people that are having to pay these prices and you are grateful that they are paying as well. Another thing to keep in mind is try to provide the value that the price equates to. One facility that I bought, the demand in the area, the market rents and everything were for a 10 by 20 was about $200 a month. I still kept mine at around $160 a month. And the reason for that is because the facility really needed a lot of repair and it had some other issues with it. I wanted to make sure I was being fair and in providing equal value to equal price. Now, as I started to improve the property, then I brought my street rates up to about that $200 point, and I'll start to do rent increases again and get those rents up from the current tenants that are there. But it's important to try to be as fair as possible to yourself and also to the tenants that you're renting out these storage units to. These are things that I've learned that have been helpful in dealing with rent increases, and how to set prices on my storage units. I hope that this information is really helpful to you and that it's giving you some insight and some guidance as to maybe how you can go about running your storage facility if you have one already, or if you're looking at purchasing one, or just general information that's good to know overall in the storage industry. I hope you guys are having a good day. Thank you so much for watching my content. Please press the like button if I've added value to you in any way, that you've learned something new or you've been entertained. And please make sure to press that subscribe and notification button so you know when my videos are coming out. Thank you so much, and you guys have a great day.